Welcome everyone. Welcome to today's chat. I am grateful to be joined by Mahrukh. How are you doing, Mahrukh?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, brilliant. It's nice to have you on. Now, it's a little bit different today. We're going to be talking about well-being and wellness, but perhaps you can give us a little bit of a background as to how you got into the wellness and the well-being space.
Yeah, so I'm a dentist and I've been a dentist now for about 13 years. And actually, quite quickly after graduating, maybe about 3, 4 years in, I went through a divorce, which led to depression. And prior to that, didn't have any mental health challenges. A few years after that, I was working in a very toxic work environment and went through burnout. But both experiences really led me to kind of squiggle and pivot my career into psychology and the well-being space. Like I was saying earlier, I hadn't actually had any mental health challenges prior and didn't have a self-care routine. Although well-being and health I felt was important to me, I wasn't actually actively doing anything daily or weekly or monthly. And so I kind of really didn't know how to go about looking after myself, and also prevent illness and feel good. And it was through exploring therapy and learning these absolutely like amazing psychological tools, things like mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps with unhelpful thoughts, things like resilience training, as well as self compassion skills. I learned some of this with my therapist. And then when I started really thinking about my profession, dentistry, I don't know if you're aware, but as with our other healthcare colleagues, there is such a high rate of burnout. There's such a high rate of suicide as well. So a lot of my colleagues were sadly passing away to suicide. And in dentistry, as well as medicine, there is a focus really at crisis point services. So by then, it was 2018, and already there were quite a few services for us at crisis point. So we actually have a 24 hours helpline, a bit like Samaritans for dentists. We also have a service where you can self-refer, you don't have to go through a GP. So we had those things set up, but nothing preventative. Certainly at uni, we weren't taught about clinician well-being. We weren't taught about how to use these tools or experiment with them and see what kind worked for us. And so that really led me to form Mind Ninja back in 2019. So about 5 years in business now. And that, from my perspective, I really wanted to bring an evidence-based or research-based tools to dental professionals and healthcare professionals early on so that they had it in their back pocket. Not to say that you won't experience stress or unhappiness or burnout, but at least you were in a better position, so that you could really support yourself. And then part of that journey meant upskilling. So I upskilled as a wellbeing psychologist. I completed a master's in applied positive psychology, as well as trained as a mindfulness teacher. And honestly, like the best fun upskilling and learning. I love learning, but especially when it's about health,
Mm.
positive health, like it brings me so much happiness. And just discovering positive psychology, honestly, for myself was just so eye-opening. It's a new kind of, well, relatively new branch of psychology. Traditional psych actually focuses a lot on illness, whereas positive psychology was really born out of a frustration from psychologists that there was a big emphasis on illness, but nothing around, on the positive well-being markers,
Mm.
things like feeling engaged at work, feeling energized, life satisfaction, happiness, mindset, all of those like really practical kind of tools and important things that make life worth living. And so it gives me such joy actually to be in a position now where I'm sharing this information.
Yeah, and ask a busy person, you'll get to do. Sorry, you're still a part-time dentist, aren't you? And you're working with your the business that you found, Mind Ninja, and we'll talk about Mind Ninja and how you help, and we'll talk about your Squiggly Life Kit as well, because I think that's really important. But like we were saying earlier, and this is having met you and discussed like the two different industries, the pet grooming and the dentistry. I wanted to bring you on and have a chat to our pet groomers, because I think there's quite a lot of crossover with the burnout and just the general life busyness as well, which can lead to those illnesses. But you're right, everything's geared up around waiting for you to fall over, isn't it? Waiting for you to have that illness, or to come across to become depressed or whatever. And there's nothing, there's no preventative. So
Yeah, absolutely.
nothing being. We all talk about it. Quite a lot of the time. We talk about the illnesses, but we don't talk about the positives before, and the mindset work that we need to do before that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite a pivotal kind of shift when you realize that actually, just like our physical well-being, we understand we might need to go to the gym or, go for a walk, and nutrition is important, sleep is important. There's the same aspect when it comes to our well-being, and we all sit on a mental health continuum, and we're constantly shifting. So we know that genetically we sit somewhere on that continuum, but life throws us different things, and so we are constantly shifting up and down. And then there is this interplay between our risk and protective factors, and so if we double down on the protective factors, we're actually shifting towards positive health. And this, I feel, this specific knowledge actually is really useful for someone, because you've actually got a roadmap to potentially getting towards like flourishing and thriving states, as opposed to feeling as though you have no sense of autonomy or control over the situation. So it's quite powerful, I think, to know about that. And certainly I've gone on that journey myself as well. I literally had no understanding, and it's quite ironic because I'd actually done a psychology BSc as a dental student. So after my third year of dental school, I took a year out and I did a BSc in a year. It's a bit of a weird thing, but medics and dentists have got this weird opportunity in the UK to do this degree in a year for funsies. And I was like, yes, let's do it. Psychology makes sense. And so I did a year on psych, but it was very much focused on illness side of things.
Mm.
And also completely different time period as well, where I feel as though there wasn't as much emphasis on just opening up and speaking about things like imposter syndrome. Things like burnout wasn't really discussed, and so I probably, reflecting back on it, I probably had some of the symptoms of burnout just being a student,
Right.
as probably a lot of university students might experience, as well as a lot of people working, just generally, because we're simply not aware of those, and we're not really aware of the proactive steps we can take in terms of mental fitness.
I think looking back, my son is in secondary school, and I think they do have mental well-being days, mental health awareness now. They do put on like meditation courses, but 14, 15-year-olds, they're gonna be like, really, I'm not gonna go to that kind of thing. So they kind of like shrug it off a bit. I obviously do encourage my son to do that, having been through a mental health journey myself. But so maybe the message is starting to come through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you happy to share maybe a little bit about how, because you said that you'd never suffered from depression or any mental illnesses before then, and did it kind of just did someone have to sort of point it out to you when you went through your divorce and then got into the
Yeah.
depression? Did someone have to sort of say, I think this is what's going on with you, or did you recognize it?
Yeah, I think having some baseline understanding of psychology has probably been helpful, but it was quite apparent to me that I wasn't feeling great.
Hmm.
And I was going through a divorce, and I appreciate when you're going through a divorce, you're probably not going to feel great. So my immediate thing really was, I just want to speak to someone, a therapist. In my eyes, I thought of it more as a coach that will give me tools to help support myself. But I was recognizing the signs. I was feeling really demotivated. So the things that normally brought me pleasure, and excitement, just didn't feel exciting anymore. So I didn't have that motivation that I would normally have to be organizing things. I also noticed, again, depression looks differently for everyone, but for me, I really noticed that I was feeling a lot less sociable, and normally I liked hanging out with friends, and it felt Like I was kind of withdrawing, and that was out of character for me. I was overeating, and then I was also under eating. So changes in how I was eating. Sleep was really difficult. So there were quite obvious changes that I could see. And from my perspective, emotionally, so aside from some of the physical signs and symptoms, emotionally it was very difficult to navigate, because when you're going through any sort of trauma or loss, you go through these stages of grief. And I didn't know how to navigate it. It was quite uncomfortable because, one moment you're kind of chewing over things about the past, and then you're kind of time traveling into the future. That feels super anxious. And that happens all in the course of a few kind of minutes. And that feels quite unstable, having not experienced that before. So from my perspective, I was like, look, there's got to be something that's going to help me, and I just want to learn how to do it. And so over the course of a few months, I started to kind of unpick my thought passions and to develop a new relationship with my emotions and thoughts and process. Because actually, when you're going through difficult and heavy emotions, your kind of go-to response for most of us is to push back rather than bring in and process and deal with it. We find ways to distract ourselves and ways to cope with that discomfort. And I knew that was not going to be helpful for me long term. So from my perspective, I was like, okay, let's have a therapist. I really want to meet someone that I connect with, and let's just deal with this head on, so that I'm not hopefully having to deal with this much later on with far worse circumstances. So yeah, that was the kind of protocol. But it is really tough when you're at that stage to learn something new, because you're going through illness. So it's not an easy process, but I think luckily for me, I didn't feel that stigma to seek help, and it wasn't someone signposting me or family member telling me I should go. It was very much, I want to go, and I just don't. I want to process this, but I also want to feel good again. So there were like two important aspects to that therapy, and that's the first time actually I discovered mindfulness in any kind of meaningful way. Prior to that, I had heard about it, because this would have been around 2015. By then, people were already talking about mindfulness, but I, like so many of us, felt that how can it be helpful? How can honing into your breath actually be a good use of time? So like, just I didn't really get it, and it was just my therapist literally saying, "Look, check this out." And at that period, actually, I really struggled. Again, everyone, has different signs and symptoms, but I really struggled to read, and so like my brain couldn't cope with kind of reading as much. But I
Busy.
found,
It's too
yeah,
the brain's too busy to take.
yeah, it just couldn't read. And so I was finding that it was much easier to take in information via podcast or a video. And so I discovered, so my route into mindfulness actually was Andy Puddicombe's TED Talk. It takes 10 minutes, it takes just 10 mindful minutes or something like this. And he's juggling and he's talking about mindfulness. And it's a brilliant talk. I loved it. And then I started kind of delving into Headspace more and Andy Puddicombe's kind of journey. And he went from being depressed and lost, and then traveling to be a monk, and then bringing this back into his work with Headspace. And so that really was my first kind of foray into mindfulness, and it just was so practical during that period. Like I said, I wasn't, I didn't go straight into meditation. It was more little aspects like mindful walking, which was really therapeutic. And prior to that, I had no relationship really with nature. So again, this sounds weird, but I didn't really go for like walks to the park or the woods. It just wasn't, even my upbringing. We went to the park, but kind of as a student, I got out of that habit. And so I didn't have any relationship with nature. And then it was through that journey where I started practicing mindfulness outside and just simply taking in the different senses. So noticing what I could see, smell, hear. And these are things we naturally do when we're outdoors, actually. So it's not a really tough skill to develop. And then I also started delving into being creative more. And again, I'd lost that aspect of myself, through, I guess, studying and just not prioritizing it. And I think a lot of us do that. We kind of forget all of our brilliant kind of strengths we had as a kid. And so again, although it was tough, there was a rediscovery of my strengths, and kind of creating what the world could look like in the future, which is also positive. So I joined like an art class. Again, I'm not really good at art. It was just literally because I wanted to switch off and be present. And I found that playing with acrylic paint was a great way of being mindful again. And it just meant that my brain was being present rather than whirling with a billion unhelpful negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And so that was great. And then I also started upcycling furniture as well. Again, had no DIY experience. Just I'm more of a girly girl, but just the act of doing something with my hands and being creative was brilliant. Mindfulness, get into flow states. I felt happier at that point. And so I'd get little things around my house, like a IKEA footstool. I would sand it down, paint it, and add like Mexican tiles, and yeah, do like really colorful, fun things. Again, kind of, I guess, on reflection, I know that I was leaning into my strengths, and that was useful to overcome quite a challenging period in my life. But I'm really glad I got that rediscovery, because now that I know that that's important to me, I can kind of keep using it.
Yeah.
So in lots of ways, I would say that I went through what we call in psychology, instead of post-traumatic stress, the flip of that, which is post-traumatic growth, which is when you come out of the other end of a traumatic event. Sometimes there are a lot of positives that we glean and gain, and we create this new world, and we are more resilient at coming out of it, which is a really lovely concept. And yeah, like I said, there's a lot of research to support that. Sometimes that's the case, even in quite horrific circumstances. I wouldn't say like my divorce was really horrific, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's also nice to know that there is, through trauma, some great kind of benefits we can glean.
I've never heard that expression, post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, this
And
is the
that,
thing. There needs to be more
yeah,
emphasis. This comes from positive psychology, which is
yeah.
I really love this. But yeah,
It's all you hear in the news and the media and videos and social media is PTSD,
yeah.
post-traumatic stress, and obviously it's a thing, isn't it? But we never have anyone talk about post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, I just think it's such a gorgeous kind of concept, and really hopeful that just because you're going through something, really horrible, it doesn't mean that you can't, there can't be some positives coming out of it at some point when you've had enough time to kind of process.
Mm.
So yeah, really kind of interesting research, and certainly like I feel like I really embody that. My life has changed a lot because of that divorce. I'm really grateful for it. I also met my husband, so absolutely thankful for that. And then obviously career wise, and my sense of meaning, this was really important, because again, when you go through trauma or a traumatic event of any sort, you often need to rebuild your life and think of how you can have this sense of meaning again, because there is a question of meaning. You start questioning like every aspect of your life, and so you're rebuilding it. And there is that beauty in that, because you can rebuild it in the way you want to, and you can rebuild it in a way where you can actually be reflective and be quite intentional. And prior to that, I feel like I was probably sleepwalking and doing all the things I probably thought I was supposed to do, which is go to dental school, graduate, and get a job and keep earning more money. And I discovered that actually that wasn't meaningful for me. I love seeing patients. I still see them, and it's great. But still, again, the best part of my job, dentistry wise, I feel, is getting to know my patients and the relationships we build over the years. I've been in my practice for about 7 years, so you really get to know them. So I feel like, even again, I'm looking at that through the lens of connection psychology. Like I like that aspect. And I can do dentistry, so that's helpful. Like, I know I've got the skill set, but it's more, I think, the connection that I love the most. And it's really nice actually having found something meaningful, and I guess also just finding like a little gap in the market. For me, it felt really obvious. We really need this. So it's been really nice to champion this in dentistry and really emphasize it. And then seeing the world also become more and more inclined as well since COVID. So it's been really nice to see that kind of shift in perspective, because actually prior to COVID, having these conversations around well-being sometimes was really jarring for people because they didn't feel as though they could resonate. They just couldn't connect with that because they felt also like, perhaps wrongly, but they felt like I'm not the type of person that would ever burn out or
Yeah.
experience depression, so actually it's not really relevant for me. But since COVID, I think there's a greater understanding that actually, yeah, we're all on this continuum. I really get it. Like, I
Why
understand.
should we, yeah, why should we wait until we do burn out, or why should we wait
Yeah,
until we get the signs and
absolutely.
symptoms of depression? With the when you were going through your mindfulness journey, it requires quite a lot of discipline, doesn't it? You know, put the phone down or take the headphones out as you're walking through the woods or the fields. You know, putting time in your diary to actually make time for some of this. How did you deal with that? Are you quite a disciplined person yourself, or did you find, right, you get up, right, what am I going to do for my mindfulness today, or did you plan it out? How did that work?
Yeah, I think during the recovery phase, it was being really clear and having clear activities that I could do. Like I said, prior to that, I hadn't focused on health at all, really.
Mm.
And so once I'd realised here are some activities that really bring me a lot of joy and feel good, it was trying to kind of fit that in. So I started having a morning routine and evening routine, which I never had before. So the morning routine might have involved kind of walking around my house before work and slowing down, and switching off, like, so not listening to a podcast, but just honing into the five senses and the surroundings. So you've got the mindfulness piece there, but it also included having a gratitude practice as well. So writing things that I was grateful for. That's a great way of honing into everything that's going well, because actually there are things that, even small wins that occur, even when we're got going through a lot of tough stuff, there are like small wins that we have, and our brain has this natural negativity bias. So basically, me finding activities that worked for me, and for me that was being outdoor in nature, and then having some sort of gratitude or journaling practice. With the mindfulness, I started really small with the meditation side. I went more into the informal kind of mindfulness practices. So again, when I was outside in nature, sometimes I would do mindful photography. So I would still use my phone, but I'd hone into like beautiful areas of the woods, or clouds, or just
Yeah.
something that would bring me happiness and joy, and hone into details. And that's still mindfulness. That's still actually exercising the mindful muscle as well. And it leaned into creativity as well, which was great. So I loved that aspect. So it was a lot of kind of mindful photography, walking in nature, and then the creativity side, which was joining that art class. So I had a group, which was really nice as well, of other people learning how to paint. And again, I didn't put any up. So I think probably more in certain areas I'm not very perfectionistic, and I wasn't around art. I am probably in other areas, but not around art. So I didn't feel that struggle that my art needs to be perfect, because I'm not an artist. I'm okay with that. And the goal of the art class was to have fun, enjoy, and to play with paint. That was it. Like, that was the goal. So I found that was very mindful as well, because you're honing into the strokes of the brush, and really honing into the creative process, and you're getting into flow state. So, from, I guess the simple answer is, like, I worked out activities I liked, and then it wasn't so hard to schedule it because I liked it. Um, and they were really small things, like going for a walk and slowing down, and I could see the immediate benefit. Now that I've come out of, that recovery, yes, it is difficult. I agree with being intentional, because everyone's so busy. So what can be helpful is just working out what, firstly, your activities might be. So if you have a list of activities that you like doing, being clear around that. And then when you have pockets of time, because we all do, and sometimes we reach for our phone, and that can be quite draining on our well-being. But if we know activities that bring us joy and are good for our brains, and we kind of know what to do in those moments. So during my days, the way I've tried to embed the well-being stuff, so it doesn't feel like I'm having to carve a crazy amount of time.
Mhm.
So the morning routine I still like to do, and an evening routine, because my sleep isn't always great. So I need a wind down, like kids, essentially. Like, I need to switch off, otherwise I will just keep going. So that's been quite helpful. So going for that walk, the gratitude journaling practice has been really useful, and then even having meditations that are like 5-10 minutes long. Then, in terms of my kind of work day, I'll try and embed kind of mindful deep breaths, um, you know, throughout the day. So when I'm with my patients, even, I've got so many opportunities. I'm wearing a mask, like, no one actually needs to know that I'm taking a deep breath. So I'm delivering local anesthetic, for example, I'm taking deep breaths. I'm waiting for the composite bonding to set, and that's for 20 seconds. So I've got time. I can cure with my patient and take deep breaths. And it's really interesting, because actually that energy is transferred to your patient. And so you'll find this as well, even in your work day, if you're working like with the pet groomers, with the pets, or with
Mm. Yeah,
your
definitely see that.
clients, like, you'll notice that energy kind of changes. So what I'd probably encourage everyone to do is to try and think of how you can piggyback off existing stuff you're already doing, so it doesn't feel like so overwhelming. I'm
Yeah.
so busy I can't fit it in. And it could be, that you already have like a practice of going for a run. Perhaps could you take deep breaths at that point, after the run, like slow down, walk, and take deep breaths? Or, is there a way that you can kind of piggyback off stuff you're doing?
There's definitely pet groomers will definitely see the benefits of being a calmer person doing the breath work whilst they're around dogs, because like dogs and well, dogs definitely like feed off the emotions and of the person that's in front of them. So there's definitely people who have a calmer salon or calmer area that they work in, and the dogs feed off that, and that they have a better time. So that's definitely something people can do. One thing, I got to the end of Ali Abdul's book, Productivity, Feel Good Productivity. It was really interesting because you touched on nature earlier, and one thing he said about nature and getting out into nature and stuff like that. And before I read it, and before I kind of sat down with you, I've set up my new office here, and I've just out here. I've got a little veranda, and I've got bird feeders.
Oh,
So I can actually sit here. I do have to watch the squirrel sometimes taking all the bird feed. That's quite funny. But I sit here and I watch the birds coming in and taking the seed and feeding each other and stuff like that. The squirrel comes in. I had a bee swarm here yesterday that I took photos and videos of. But unbeknowingly, that little 2 second, 3 second lookout, what bird's on the feeder now, it's all that time we're spending with nature. I can hear the birds. And I said
exactly.
about doing this at the dog shop where our pet groomers are, and like putting some bird feeders in the garden. So when staff have their break, and there'll be groomers listening to this going, they have a break. When if you do get a lunch hour or lunchtime or lunch half an hour, you can just go out and sit in an area and perhaps watch the birds or have a look at the bees, like set up some plants and have a look at watch the bees sort of pollinating them and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think trying to nudge us towards well-being actions by changing the environment can be so impactful. So, like you were saying, trying to get nature in somehow, and it can be through even having plants within that area, or having that bird feed, so you're getting the birds and you can hear those beautiful bird sounds. It's so powerful. Those little things are so useful to being present. You hone into those sounds, and it's a great way of being mindful. And it's so easy. Like this isn't a difficult skill in that respect. Meditation, I appreciate, is different, but with us kind of slowing down and having those opportunities, nature's great for that. And we've got a lot of evidence. There was a study a few years ago saying ideally 120 minutes a week of being outdoors in a green space, ideally a forest, like a wild space, but if not, a park is good. But trying to incorporate that in our downtime, and obviously with the weather that's not always possible, but with spring and summer coming up, we've got these amazing opportunities. And could you do the activities that you would, perhaps, you've got kids. Is there a way of bringing them into nature more, so you can go on that journey together and help them as well fall
Yeah,
in love with nature
yeah,
at
we
an
used
early
to.
age?
Yeah, we got some fields out the back, and actually, when it's been raining really hard, there's like streams and rivers, and we used to take the dogs up to the fields and then go and unblock the rivers and the streams, and the kids love it. And again, it's like an hour away from everything, isn't it? I think
Yeah,
sometimes,
it's beautiful.
obviously, you got a lot of dog groomers own a lot of dogs themselves, um, and obviously they do get out in nature because they go on dog walks and stuff like that. But even with the dog walks, I sometimes feel maybe they can be a bit forced because you're like, right, I've got half an hour before I go to work.
Mhm.
I need to walk Fido. I need to get the dog out. So even then, although they are walking the dog, are they taking the
Mhm.
time, and is it a rushed walk because of the amount of the
Yeah.
amount of that time pressures that are on us? So are they enjoying that walk as much as maybe they should be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does take a lot of internet, like being intentional to hone into being mindful. So, I mean, it all starts with awareness, though. So if you firstly check in and realize that actually you are in your head, that's a great first step. And once we know that, then we can try and hone into the present more by anchoring to the different sounds. And if there is a way where it can be less rushed, I appreciate that can be difficult, but sometimes it's about planning and just
Yeah.
scheduling something in. Yeah, and it could be, okay, next month I'm planning this, and it is my time, and we're going to start, a morning routine for myself where I can do this. But yeah, again, like looking at your schedule and planning it and seeing what works for you. And everyone's different. Everyone's got such varied timetables, but I'm sure although it seems quite tough, we probably have got 5 to 10 minutes where we could do something daily. And so it needn't be a lot of time, but just, I guess, scheduling that in, and also being clear as to which activity you'd like to prioritize, and then experimenting, seeing what works for you. If it doesn't work, let's shift and do something else that works better for you.
And the beauty of this, if people take away a couple of things from this chat, the beauty of it is if they've got children, the children might start noticing a difference, but then they also might be able to educate the kids on how to look after their be mindful and well-being. You know, it might start rubbing off on friends, it might start rubbing off on family, because they start noticing that you're doing a different routine, or you're like, putting taking the photos of nature or hanging up your bird feeders and stuff like that. So the information sort of disseminates out, doesn't it?
Yeah, in psychology, we call it positive contagion. So when you do something positive, then it could have, like you were saying, that ripple effect. You see that in teams as well, and you certainly can see that in families. So there is a way of embedding this in the culture of your family potentially. So I think it's a brilliant thing to impart on children. As you were saying, we're seeing it more at school level, which is great because there will be kids that actually it does sit into their subconscious so that they can kind of delve into it. And some of them are really enjoying it.
Mm.
Um, I think what's really fab to see at school level is this understanding of emotions and feelings more, because actually a lot of us don't really have the language to share how we're feeling and recognize our emotional state. So having that vocab and starting exploring that through tools like mindfulness is brilliant. With kids, often there's a weather analogy that's often used, where we think of our emotions and thoughts like a weather report. So I'm feeling sunny today, or I'm feeling, thundery, or whatever it might be. And it's quite playful, which is really nice. But I do feel like even adults can kind of really learn from even that analogy. It's quite useful because when we're going through tough, challenging moments, it's quite reassuring to also know that emotions and thoughts come and go like the weather. They're not going to stay, and they will shift, and they shift fairly quickly actually if you process them. And so that's actually quite helpful to know as well, that you're not going to be stuck in an emotional state. And this is all part of building emotional intelligence as well. Really kind of building that from hopefully a kid level, but we can certainly learn these tools even now, which is great, and get even better at this.
And how, obviously, with your business, My Ninja, you get in and you do talks on team and how to look after the well-being of your team. What are you kind of? We have groomers that run busy salons, multiple members of staff. What are you kind of like five top tips for helping your staff's well-being in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and such an important kind of topical one. I wonder if this is possible, but this is what I would recommend is if there could be one person within that team that was a mental wellbeing champion. Ideally, if they could be trained in mental health first aid and suicide awareness, that'd be fab. I would probably go to say if you could get the whole team trained in mental health first aid, that would be really, really brilliant. But the idea with a team wellbeing champion is for them to kind of detect early signs of mental illness amongst the team, signpost them to the relevant services, and be able to have those difficult conversations around mental well-being. And so that's the kind of concept, but they also can help design perhaps away days which has a focus on well-being. So it's someone that already perhaps already has an interest in health and well-being. So that will be really kind of a nice addition. Also, further on to, with that training aspect, if there was a way where you could get annual training around wellbeing resilience for the team, that would be fab. In the dental medical world, we're all taught every year certain, we've got these training requirements essentially. CPD, yeah. So I wonder if it's the same with pet groomers. Uh,
Well, pet groomers do like they do enjoy doing CPD,
yeah,
but I think a lot of CPD is very focused around improving your grooming skills, your scissor
yes,
skills,
yeah, absolutely.
the health of the pet. But I think a lot of the time the health of the groomer is
Yes, so crucial.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Because look, without the health of the groomer, they're just you're not able, you're just not
not help
able to
the
look
pet.
after anyone else. Yeah, so it's just not possible. So yeah, absolutely. Same in dentistry and medicine. There's a big focus on clinical competencies, but not so much on the well-being of the clinician. And so, yeah, having kind of annual resilience training, well-being training is really helpful. And in that, you'd learn then how to use those tools, as I was saying, mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, learn kind of resilience skills, which are just great life skills, to be honest. And you can learn how to really cope with obstacles better, which is quite useful for business anyway. And that's where potentially the mindset work can come in as well. But having, that again with this coaching program that you have, that's part of it. So it could be, even subscription to something like this, that can be part of the training, right? So having a priority on that. Another aspect that I would say is to really celebrate the team members and to double down on the wins. Sometimes when we're in teams, there can be a focus on, look, we've got to-do list, and we focus kind of on the negatives because we're trying to fix problems essentially. With positive psychology, the approach is very much focusing on amplifying what's working well. So is there a way where you can increase positive emotions by heading into like what is going well? And it might be in a team meeting, instead of going straight into the agenda, could you perhaps going around each team member and share the wins of the day, small and big wins, or the week, and it's so lovely to hear other people's wins as well. And that's a great way of amplifying positive emotion, just simply through hearing. Is there a way that you can also spotlight members of the team as well and celebrate them? And it could be that you have like monthly awards or gratitude conversations or a gratitude board, or some way that you can really show appreciation, because there are wins and great things happening all the time, and sometimes we don't focus on that enough. And then the other aspect would be to, if possible, is there a way that you can craft really jobs and roles around strengths more? So every team member has got their individual strengths, and having an exploration of strengths is really useful, and then crafting, hopefully, and creating roles that are specific to that person. That way you'll find increased engagement at work, like energy at work, because the person's doing the stuff that they're actually inherently good at, which is great. They're more productive, more efficient. And the last tool or tip I would say is think of ways you can infuse well-being at work. So like I was saying with mindfulness, it could be simply taking deep breaths when you remember throughout your day. So, or it might be just 3 deep breaths. That's the goal for the day. Get this ahead so that you're not doing all your stress management at the end of the day, which is super, super hard to do, as we all know, right? So if we could just infuse it in the day. The science, what it shows is if we make the exhale, the out breath, longer than the in breath, we are triggering the parasympathetic nervous system, and we're inviting a host of potential positive emotions like serenity and calm. If anything, it will help you focus. Another great hack when we've got busy days and it's just we want something kind of a little bit more immediate, I use aromatherapy meditation or aromatherapy deep breath. So I pop a little bit of essential oil onto my hands, and then just take 3 deep breaths, and honing into the scent is a great way of being instantly kind of present, because it's easier for us to hone into a smell than sometimes our own breath, and so that could be a great one. I do this with my nurse as well. Like we'll have a crazy busy day and double booked, but we'll have a moment, and we'll prioritize it. And we both sit together and we're like, oh, I'm going to try this oil. And we just have a bit of fun with it. But it's quite a nice pick me up quite quickly. So if aromatherapy is your thing, you probably would love it. So find ways you could do that. If it's not, so that could be something you could add. It could even be taking, when you go for your lunch, for the first 3 bites, honing into the sensations of the food, the smells, the taste, the textures, and that's you being mindful as well. It could be even mindfully listening to your team members, so really paying attention to what they're saying. in order to really understand rather than to respond. And that's what we mean by mindful listening. That's a great one, I think, for creating a culture that's really open and caring and non-judgmental. And I think that's really important in team well-being. We want to create a culture which is kind and compassionate, and that, part of that is listening to our team members, and supporting them. And if there is a way of really exploring values with your team, that will be fab as well. So having perhaps a team session where you create a poster together and having your values really kind of clear, but you're coming to a joint exploration of your values, is a great way of reminding like the values of the practice, and gives you a sense of meaning as well. Like, you're coming into work, but there's a bigger purpose, beyond this. It's actually creating, a caring, warm environment for us so that we can be happy. And I think the best teams, or the most productive teams, are the happiest teams. So if we can double down on those happiness practices, I think we could go potentially quite far.
Yeah, you're gonna like reduce sick days, you're gonna reduce stress, anxiety. It's gonna save you money if in the long
Absolutely.
run, isn't it? Because you're preventing that kind of loss of people in your business. But so people might struggle with ideas and understand a bit about mindfulness and well-being, and this is where I've got your toolkit in front of me, and this is where you've put together a toolkit to help people, haven't you? So let's hear a bit more about your toolkit. Why is it called?
Yeah,
What's the word squiggly? You like the word
I
squiggly?
like the word squiggly because I was thinking about this. I was thinking about a title, but I was thinking more just around like what that could look like. And it just came to me. I was brainstorming, and again, it was like probably quite late at night. I was talking to my husband. I was thinking, oh, life's quite squiggly, isn't it? And for whatever reason, I think we started just using that like squiggly more and more.
Hmm.
And I think it was just reflecting and thinking how when I was younger, I thought everything would be really linear. So, I had a plan. I would do my GCSEs, get my A levels, get a really good degree, and then have a job, and then have the house, and like life would be amazing.
Yeah.
But it hasn't quite worked like that. And I think everyone can resonate with that.
Yeah.
Like, life is really squiggly. And it's because it's so squiggly, I feel like it can be a bit of a challenge because we're trying to navigate that journey. And so that was really the thought around calling it navigating a squiggly life. And I thought what would be great is if I can create a mindfulness toolkit that was fun and engaging. And actually, the real story of the Squiggly Toolkit, it all started during my master's in applied positive psychology. My dissertation project was to write about a product. And me being like super practical, it just didn't make any sense to just write about something. So I was thinking, this is brilliant. I'm going to write about this, understand the theory, and then I'm going to create something. And so I completed my dissertation, I believe, in 21. And at the same time, I set to create a mindfulness toolkit for the dental profession called Mind Flossing Toolkit. And so that year, as I completed masters, I launched the Mind Flossing. And again, like, I really wanted to make it fun, engaging. I hired an illustrator, Christy Johnson, who's been doing my artwork, since then. And I worked with her really closely to create illustrations that were friendly and compassionate and also diverse, because that was really important. I wanted to be reflected in wellness products that I think generally don't always reflect diversity. And so I already had like an idea because I tested it with the dental market, and I'd been selling that to dental organizations and using it in workshops. So I had that basis. And then over the years, I've been thinking it'd be great to kind of broaden this out. And so that was where the thought around kind of modifying the mind flossing to create the squiggly kind of came about. But I wanted to add different things in this. So I added QR codes that link to guided meditations. I also added QR codes that linked to worksheets. So you can scan the QR code and you can then start applying positive psychology and the science of well-being to your life. So in terms of the worksheets, they're super broad as well. They're not just mindfulness. It's more probably like even broader, like well-being. So you can kind of delve into growth mindset and really apply it with a challenge that you're having currently. Like, how can you switch from, a fixed mindset in an area to a growth mindset? I've got, worksheets around increasing your emotional literacy in your language. I've got worksheets that are more kind of problem solving. So if you've got a challenge and you just feel like super overwhelmed and you're like, gosh, I really don't know where to start, you've got a worksheet that works you through, like, what are all the options? What are you going to do next? What will you try? What are the obstacles? And it just gives you a nice plan. So yeah, the intention really was to create something that you could pick up, use a card for 10 minutes on an activity, and you could play with it essentially because they're in card format, and you can take the card with you. You can use the card as a prompt, and with the interactive aspect, hopefully it's just more engaging than your regular deck of cards. I'm actually a really big fan of cards, so I have so many. I've got like positive affirmation cards and nature cards and just all of the well cards that you can think of.
Well, I think that's what really appealed to me about it. So the cards are like postcard size, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're postcard size. You've got lots of different areas, so like navigating it, how to use it, emotions and thoughts, mindfulness concepts, mindful activities, self-compassion, journaling, meditation, nature, creativity, gratitude, and self-care. And you can literally just, I suppose, mix and match, pick a topic that you
Yeah.
want to learn about that day. And the cards aren't, the thing for me is the cards aren't overwhelming. Having gone through some, they literally take a couple of minutes to read and then perhaps reread and then start to think about it, don't you? So it could be that you just allocate a little bit of time, you give yourself a bit of time just to like navigate through the pack and just read one card a day and then go back to it. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I really want to make this not overwhelming and something that you can fit in kind of seamlessly. So yeah, absolutely. I'm not like, there isn't a set way of kind of using the pack. I very much want you to play with it and dip in and dip out as you want, or you could go section by section, whatever kind of suits you. With the kind of wide range of topics, the whole emphasis really is to remind you that there's so many different activities that you can do, and experiment, and there isn't like a one size fits all. It's just working out like what resonates, what works for you, which is great. I personally love the self compassion component of this toolkit, of these deck of cards, because actually what I've noticed from working in the business for 5 years and talking to others is actually a lot of us are really self-critical, and we really struggle to know how to be kind to ourselves, like talk to ourselves in a kind way, but also in terms of actions, be kind to ourselves, and look after ourselves. And I think it is a big struggle. And so this is where self-compassion is a research-backed, proven tool that can help. And it's helped me massively as well. Just to give a really concrete example, prior to Mind Ninja, I'd done no public speaking. And so the thought of actually running workshops and speaking on stages was honestly horrific. I remember being a school kid and literally shaking, and as I was delivering a talk, presentation that you got to do. So in my head, I was like, crap, I'm gonna like stumble over words. I just don't know how I'm going to be able to do it. So it's been a journey actually to get to the point to actually feel comfortable with teaching and running workshops and speaking on a stage. But what has really helped me in a concrete way is self-compassion. So just to kind of emphasize that, in terms of steps, I've firstly used mindfulness to notice when I'm being critical. So I might say to myself, I notice I'm having a thought that I'm not good enough, shouldn't belong here on the stage, whatever imposter syndrome thought you might have. So that noticing and that labeling is really, really powerful. And the research really supports that, because basically we're putting a bit of psychological distance between us and that thought, and we're not fusing with that thought as much. So that labeling actually is a great step. The second step is reminding myself that I'm not alone, that actually public speaking fear is really common, and we're all on this journey. There's loads of people that have been scared, that are scared of speaking on stages, so you're definitely not alone there. And then
Actually
the
helps
third
you. Yeah, it helps you a bit as well, doesn't it?
yeah,
Those nerves help you and keep you sharp in a way.
absolutely. And then the third aspect is honing into the words and gestures of kindness. So talking to myself as I would a friend. So it might be really difficult if you've got a very critical voice to do this, but with practice it becomes easier. So I might say to myself, look, I know this is a really tough experience. I've got your back. You're going to be fine. You've done this before, and each time you get better. And just using words, whatever kind of resonates with you, using those words. And we know inherently how to talk to others. We know how to talk to our kids and our loved ones. So we know that skill. It's just kind of saying it to ourselves. And then even gestures of kindness. So the simple of kind of squeezing your arm or your hand, that's a great way of providing comfort. The thing is, when we're critical and we have those imposter syndrome thoughts or those critical thoughts, we're actually triggering the fight, flight, freeze response, and we're actually inviting then this cascade of hormones and cortisol racing through our body. And so we need to do things that can buffer against that state, because long term being in that state isn't good for our health. And this is where, practically speaking, like mindfulness, self-compassion can be really useful in the moment when you've got to do these things, and you realize that you can really go out of your comfort zone with kindness, and support yourself. And it's a lot more sustainable than beating yourself up for not being perfect. And so it's got me it's practically really, really benefited my life in terms of being able to perform and able to help others. Like I think I really needed a tool to help with my anxiety, so like it was just really helpful.
I mean, I've opened up the toolkit, and I've gone to the self-compassion part.
Yeah.
There's stuff in here that straight away I know would help the pet groomers that I work with. So there's some very simple cards to go through, and one of them is the perfectionism trap.
Yeah.
So many people struggle because a little bit about social media, they compare their haircuts that they've done to others and stuff like that. And you can start learning about the trap that you're in. And then the card gives you practical steps, and there's a QR code as well for worksheets to start tackling that, because no one wants to feel like this day in, day out. We want to get out of this. So sometimes we have to be our own sort of little superhero and get ourselves out of this. And then the next one is lifting the mask of self-doubt using self-compassion. And again, you could read this every day probably for a few weeks until it starts to you're starting to learn, understand your emotions, understand your feelings, and then you put the card teaches us how to put a stop to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just about kind of practicing, but the first step comes with the awareness piece. So that's why I've got kind of bite-sized info just highlighting the key aspects of psychology. And again, with perfectionism, that's so common, isn't it? When we are so passionate about something, we do want to do it perfectly. We want to deliver the best we can for our clients, for our pet owners. And like you were saying, you've got the social media aspect. That's a whole new layer that actually is really kind of tough to manage, because we only see those curated, highly curated, gorgeous feeds, and we don't see the journey that everyone's gone on, or those aspects. And so that's where self-compassion, mindfulness actually is just really practically useful. And you can start developing a new relationship with those emotions and thoughts. And not to say that you're not going to then experience imposter syndrome ever, or perfectionism, but you can develop a new relationship, and it becomes easier to kind of navigate, and you're less fused with it. And I think that's really important to emphasize. I noticed that whenever I get out of my comfort zone, and certainly when I was moving more from kind of clinical dentistry to psychology and being around, for example, I noticed my imposter syndrome would really get spotlighted every time I was back at King's College, is where I graduated, King's College, around other psychologists, because yes, I was new to psychology, so it completely also makes sense that I might feel like an imposter. And then I was around very senior psychologists at King's, where they're doing incredible research. But having the tools of mindfulness and self-compassion just is really, really beneficial, because you're able to stay on that journey. It's so difficult upskilling if you don't have these emotional tools. Actually, like you can't kind of learn new things, or you can't push yourself out of the comfort zone. You can't get to growth mindset, because actually it's uncomfortable. You get all of these thoughts pop up, so you need those strategies. And even when actually Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset, that term was actually coined from doing lots of research on kids. And I've just lost my point. Sorry about the kids.
The
What?
first time I'd ever heard about growth mindset was when my children started school.
Yeah, oh yeah, isn't that interesting, isn't it? Because actually I've noticed more and more there is more of a convo around growth mindset for kids. I go into Waterstones and I find a growth mindset book. But yes, Carol Dweck is the lead researcher around mindset, and all the research comes from her studying children. And when she talks about how do you then apply growth mindset, how do you like nurture from a fix to a growth, she talks about self-compassion being part of the process. And so that's really quite telling. It's nice that it's drawing upon the other areas of positive psychology. And I do have a card actually in the pack. I think it's in the first section of the pack, which is around growth mindset. And I've got a worksheet as well that can help you do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, there is a way of navigating it with greater ease, and having a new relationship, so that you're not frightened by an imposter syndrome thought. So, like I said, I will have one again, and I will have unhelpful thoughts, but I don't stay, I don't get fused, I don't stay in that space for as long as I was, and that's a win.
Yeah, it's that awareness, isn't it? And what I love about the kit again is that it's so the cards are very easy to read. They're very like short and punchy. So it's not like you're having to read a textbook or anything like that. And you can, I'm sure people that have these will go and revisit certain sections when they need revision or reminders, or got stressful times coming up, then you can go back and refresh yourself about, that self-compassion and stuff like that. It's a great little kit. So well done for putting it together.
Thank you. Yeah, I really feel like it's my little baby at the moment. It's my like most newest product, and I just feel so good about it. I
Mm.
think it's the best thing I've made. So I'm really pleased. I'm really grateful for all the feedback, and I've had some really really nice feedback around it. Yeah, like I said, the whole point is to help you, to help kind of nudge you towards taking those very intentional well-being steps, and make that more of a fun, engaging thing, so you're more likely to do it. And hopefully also with the way it's been created, because the design has really mattered to me, so hopefully it's something you want to pick up, that you want to use, and it brings you joy using it as well. So yeah, that's a kind of big wish with it.
So how can people find out more about the kit and hopefully buy it for themselves?
Yeah, so you can find more information on the Mind Ninja website, and I can give you those details that you can share. I also have a Instagram page for the Squiggly Toolkit, which is Squiggly Toolkit. I also have a YouTube page as well called Squiggly Toolkit. So on the YouTube page, you'll find all of the guided meditations and the videos that are linked to mindfulness. I'll be starting shortly a mindfulness campaign, which is all around really delving into mindfulness journey and showcasing what that looks like. I have a few videos coming up, kind of delving into that, like a bit of a like behind the scenes, month one, month two, what's it like? What are the kind of obstacles and struggles along the way? And I love that kind of concept through a storytelling lens, because a lot of us might be curious of mindfulness but don't really understand the transformational benefits that you can get and what that journey entails. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of launching that as well.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the links part or the comments part so people can find them. And you very generously offered a discount on your toolkit as well to the listeners, and the code's going to be Groomer20, so a 20% discount on the toolkit. So it's an amazing toolkit, and I'd love to get as many people sort of getting hold of it so that they can start working and do a bit of personal self-development on their well-being and mindset.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, it's been fab having a chat with you and delving into this.
Yeah, thank you for being so honest as well and open about the struggles or the things that you've been through and what motivated you to put this together and helping people going forward. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
See you soon.